for. It's an exciting time to be alive, isn't it? To see all these new things developing that can better our lives. A great example of this is an app that came out a few years ago called Be My Eyes. It's a real app that you can get like for your phone. A blind or visually impaired person can download this app to their cell phone and enter in information on what state or country they live in and what language they speak. There are over 80,000 blind or visually impaired users of this app, 80,000. However, there are over 1 million volunteers who are signed into the app as well. And all the blind person or visually impaired person has to do is enter some kind of information about what they need, and somebody in the app will respond and come to help them. I mean, isn't that incredible? You know, that gift. There was a case of a man named Stephen from Idaho. He had that app on his phone, Be My Eyes. While bending down to pick up something he dropped on the floor because he couldn't see what he was doing, he smashed his nose into the countertop. Oh. Ouch. And of course, he can't go look in the mirror to see what he did to himself like you and I would. So he calls up on the app. You know, he pulls the app up and somebody gets right back to him. They chatted for a few minutes on the phone. And then the volunteer mentioned that she could look through his phone, through his camera, and tell that his nose was all right. She told him that. But then she mentioned to him in visiting that she had problems. She was having problems with her phone. She was just lucky they were able to connect for this visit. Well, Stephen happens to be a techie. And so while they were on the phone, Stephen talked her through. Yeah, you know, because you've done this so many times for people, haven't you? Yes. Talked her through how to fix the problem on her phone, so took care of it. So here's an app for a blind person who helped him, but because of that, he was in turn able to help somebody else on the other side. What a gift. You know, to be able to enable that. Not only, I think, was, you know, his visibility issues, you know, less of a problem for him for that moment, but his spiritual issues just went soaring. You know, to be able to help somebody else when he probably felt useless a lot of the time. What a wonderful gift. In Jesus' day, they had a similar app. No. I can have more fun. This is a relaxed setting. This is more like teaching Bible study. I do that all the time in Bible study. No, there were no apps. There were no social service agencies you could go to for assistance. You know, whether it's monetary or physical assistance, you know, of people. There were no guide dogs. I mean, there was no braille. There was nothing for a blind person to do. Basically, the only hope they had was either if they had family around who would take them in and take care of them, and if they didn't, it was beg on the side of the road. Like blind Bartimaeus in our story. Religious people of those days were probably small comfort. We find another story in the Gospel of John chapter 9, where they meet a blind person, and so Jesus' disciples come to him, and they have a serious question they're asking him. They want to know the answer to him as their spiritual leader. They say, so why was this man born blind? Was it because of his sin or his parents' sin? I love Jesus' answer. He said, he was born blind so that the glory of God might be revealed through him. That's a great answer. But see, that was the attitude of the day. The religiously correct people would say, oh, well, guy's blind. Either he sinned really bad or his parents did really bad, because that's the only reason God's punishing him, obviously. The religious community was not a great comfort or a great help. The only hope they had was that people would, the Jewish people thought of the way you helped was, it was called doing a mitzvah. You were doing a good deed, a deed of righteousness. And so they'd walk down the street, and as they walk down the street, you know, they'd see some beggar along the side of the road, and they just walk by, and they would go, and then any beggar could pick it up. That way they didn't know who picked it up. So they couldn't feel self-righteous about, look at that guy, look what I did for him. But they did have the good thing they'd done, you know, and now they felt like somehow was credited to them, to their account, you know, for righteousness. But that was the only hope that they might have, was those kind of assistance. And if you're blind, imagine how easy it was to find those coins in the dirt.
Before someone else picked them up.
Somebody else would get to it before you did most of the time, yeah. So here we got this poor blind beggar on the side of the road in need of help. Another story. I don't know if any of you remember Heather Whitestone. She was Miss America in 1995. She was deaf. Her mother Daphne was told to send Heather to a local school for the deaf. At best, they said, Heather might get a third-grade education. But Daphne encouraged Heather to stay in the public school and to never expect less of herself because of her deafness. After Heather won the Miss America pageant, somebody created a poster to honor her accomplishments. Under a picture of this deaf woman winning the pageant was this caption. They said she would only be able to get a third-grade education. Fortunately, she wasn't listening. Yeah. So Bartimaeus was profoundly disadvantaged. That's the first thing we need to know about Bartimaeus. Profoundly disadvantaged. We all have handicaps. We all have. Many of us have some hearing loss. Many of the people in this room are wearing glasses, or they ought to be. I mean, mobility issues. I mean, we all have handicaps of some sort. And those are just the physical ones. We can't see all the emotional ones that people have to deal with. We all have those as well. We're all disadvantaged. We can either let it drive us down, or like Heather in that example, we can be all that we can be, and maybe even use our disadvantage to our benefit and become a better person because of it. Well, Bartimaeus was disadvantaged, but look at something else in that story. Bartimaeus was not only disadvantaged, he was also determined. Here he was sitting alongside the road, going away from Jericho. Word came to him that Jesus of Nazareth was passing by. And he could probably hear people start to chant and stuff. And so he's blind, he can't see Jesus, doesn't know even where he is, but he's standing by the side of the road or sitting, probably stood by that. He's probably just yelling it out continuously because he can't tell if Jesus is close or far away. He doesn't want to miss him. He just keeps crying out, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. I remember in that day, as we said, Bartimaeus was basically a nobody. A blind beggar. Someone to be ignored, or at best, pitied. And so people kept trying to shush Bartimaeus up. He's making a spectacle of himself, and he's spoiling the wonderful occasion they've got of the great rabbi coming to town. Bartimaeus refused to let his disability define him. He was determined to reach for the only hope that was left to him, the mercy of the Messiah. Author Tim Hansel tells of the great honor he had of introducing his two sons to motivational speaker Bob Weiland. Bob Weiland had lost both of his legs in a landmine in Vietnam while trying to save a fellow soldier. As Bob would say about his recovery from his devastating wounds, I lost my legs, but I didn't lose my heart. Bob began a grueling weightlifting program and eventually set 4 world records in powerlifting. In 1982, Bob Weiland set a goal to walk across the United States of America on his hands. It took him almost 4 years to accomplish it. His purpose was to raise money for programs for Vietnam veterans. When Tim Hansel's sons asked him what motivated him to set such a tremendous goal, he replied, to encourage those with legs to take the first step in faith to please God. He did it for those of us who could walk. Bartimaeus was disadvantaged, but he was also determined. He was not going to let people tell him to be quiet. When he saw the opportunity for healing, he came. Bartimaeus was not like the man beside the pool of Bethesda, another of the healing stories, where he just sat there at the pool. I mean, Bartimaeus got to the side of the road and he made sure he was heard and he was seen. Bartimaeus wanted to see with his eyes again. He was willing to pay any price to achieve this goal. He was determined. What a difference determination makes in life. Thank God for the Bartimaeuses of this world who will not be denied no matter what their circumstances, who keep crying out and don't give up. Bartimaeus was disadvantaged. He was determined. But that day, he was also discipled. He felt the call of Jesus to leave everything else behind him and to follow. Listen to the last few words of that story again. Jesus said to him, "Go your way, your faith has made you well." And immediately we read, Bartimaeus received his sight and followed Jesus on the way. A couple of powerful things in those comments. One is that the word in the Greek in there for your faith has made you well, the word is sozo in Greek, which can mean healed. But there's another word that means healed that's more often used, that iaomai, that simply means just physical healing. Sozo not only can be translated with the meaning of healing, also can be translated save. And I think Jesus meant both. This man was healed and he was saved because the healing transformed his life. Because he disobeyed Jesus. The first thing he did was disobey him. He says, "Go your way." He goes, I'm going with you. I'm going with you. That's that determination coming in. But he was discipled. He was now a believer. And he was not going to turn his back on that no matter what. I think, something happened to Bartimaeus that day beyond physical healing. There was a great spiritual healing and a great spiritual growth that took place in his life as well. I mean, in a sense, for Bartimaeus, what his healing said to him was also, you really matter. You're a person of worth. The incarnate God cares about you. Every person needs to hear that. The incarnate Son of God cares about you, and you, and you, and you. I don't believe that this determined man was ever again the same. We don't hear about him again. But I doubt if he ever let anyone put him down again. I doubt if he ever gave in to discouragement again. Why? Because he knew that he mattered. He knew that he had worth. Simply because his God said he did. I have a feeling that from that day on, Bartimaeus knew that he was a child of the King. And I don't think he ever forgot it. Thank God for this blind man with really no name. Bartimaeus simply means son of Bartimaeus. It really just saying who his parents were. But this man sitting beside the road out of Jericho was disadvantaged and determined and finally was discipled and became a follower of Jesus Christ. This man whose love and whose grace meant he was healed in body, mind, and spirit. Let me tell you one more story about a man who was very much like Bartimaeus. His name was Kyle Maynard. He was born with no lower arms and hands and no lower legs and feet. Kyle's parents were concerned that their son would face so many challenges in his life. They raised their son to be as independent as possible. When Kyle became a toddler, Kyle's dad decided that Kyle would have to learn to feed himself. They loved and encouraged their son, but they also let him struggle and fail at simple daily tasks, walking, eating, dressing himself, so that he would learn a sense of determination and responsibility for himself. And when Kyle questioned why he was different or why people stared at him, his grandmother Betty taught him that God had made him special for a reason. With his family's encouragement, Kyle began playing football at age 11, then tried out for the wrestling team. Kyle was extremely strong, but had serious challenges with no hands and no feet, to do wrestling holds, and to escape from other people's wrestling holds. He lost his first 35 matches, 35 in a row. How many of us would have quit after about the first 5? 35 in a row he lost. Kyle's coach came up with some new wrestling moves that took advantage of his strength and made it more difficult for his opponents to pin him. Soon Kyle started winning some matches. and eventually finished 12th in the National High School Wrestling Championships for the whole nation. After graduation, Kyle became a record-setting weightlifter, an extreme athlete, a motivational speaker, and a best-selling author. He's also the first quadruple amputee to climb Mount Kilimanjaro without using prosthetic limbs. Yeah, wow. Kyle says, I believe God uses me the way I am in order to show people that there is no amount of adversity that a single person cannot overcome if they trust in themselves and trust in the will of Jesus Christ. Every person who comes to Jesus in faith finds freedom. It may not be freedom from a disability or a difficult circumstance. It may be freedom of finding a new purpose in life, of discovering the overwhelming and unchanging love that God has for you. It may be the freedom of finding a new identity as a child of God. Jesus set Bartimaeus free from his disability. He set Kyle Maynard free from being defined by his circumstances. If you come to Jesus in faith, you will find freedom. You can find that you matter. You are known and you are loved by a God who rises above and raises you above all of those circumstances. There's nothing that you cannot overcome if you trust in His will. Amen?
Amen.
Amen.